Welcome everyone to today's webinar. I'm Wendy Webster Coakley, class of 1985, and I oversee alumni career networking for the college. It is my pleasure today to be sharing the screen with three experts in the travel space as we talk about what the travel outlook is for a post-pandemic world. I'm going to introduce them by way of introduction, and in the interest of breaking the ice and creating sort of a common bond between all Williams alums of all generations, I'm going to ask them a question, which is, what was their go-to snack bar order? And in the interest of transparency, I will start. When I was at Williams in the early 80s, mid 80s, my go-to was a hot veggie pocket and a coffee frost. So there you have it. So we're going to start with Jen Washburne, class of 86. She is the Director of Business Development and Client Management at Generali Global Assistance. Jen, since we're in the same cohort, it's very possible that you and I saw each other in the snack bar in the old Baxter. So had I seen you, what would you be ordering?
I just learned something about you today, which I'm thrilled to learn. We have so much in common. Hot veggie pocket, just like you. That was borderline healthy, except for the big, huge thing of cheese that it mostly was. And I also got the cookie and cream milkshake.
Sounds amazing. Woman after my own heart. So next, zooming in all the way from Bangkok, Thailand, where it is 11 p.m. at night. Give it up for Generali St. John, class of 98. She is the editor-in-chief at Travel and Leisure, Southeast Asia. Janine, it's 11 p.m. there. If you were on campus and it was 11 p.m. and you just finished cramming for a final, what would you be ordering?
Okay, first of all, I would start cramming for the final in 2 hours from now. Second of all, yeah, my snack bar order was Bagel Supreme, no sprouts, and a 6-pack of Diet Dr. Pepper.
Wow, okay, hardcore. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for disclosing.
Yes.
Finally, we have our sort of post-millennial or 21st century representative, Mark Rothman, class of 2005. He is the CEO of Magma Global, which is a luxury and corporate travel concierge service with offices in New York and LA. Mark, what's your order?
It was probably a pizza bagel and or curly fries. I'm not as healthy as you guys, so I kind of feel awkward now. So, I mean, if it was in the morning, it was like a honey bun, I think, right? So it's like, I don't.
Classic guy, order lots of carbs. You have a very high
probably
metabolism.
A Snapple too, or a Nantucket Nectar. A Nantucket Nectar, I don't know if they still have that. I don't know if it still exists. Nantucket Nectars were really big when I was there.
Okay, thank you. Thank you all for playing. And certainly audience, if you would like to share what your go-to snack bar order is, feel free to put it in the chat. So that sort of is a good segue to our rules of engagement here today. The chat function is your space to engage with one another, sort of react to what you're hearing, introduce yourself, where you're from. Just remember to select all panelists and all attendees in the dropdown so that your message can be seen by everyone. Otherwise, just us panelists will see it, and that's not fair. If you have any questions as you're listening to our three experts, you can put them into the Q&A that's at the bottom of your screen as it occurs to you. Do not put your questions in the chat. They will get lost forever. Put them in the Q&A, and I promise that we will do our very best to answer most, if not all, of the questions. Finally, as you saw when you joined the webinar, note that we're recording today. We will be posting it to the college's YouTube channel, and also it will be on the Alumni Relations website, the Career Connections page. Okay, so without further ado, let's get started. So needless to say, travel was really rocked by this pandemic. Being a good Williams student, I did a little research. I just Googled. According to the World Travel and Tourism Council, the industry's contribution to global GDP fell from nearly 9.2 trillion in 2019 to 4.7 trillion in 2020. So basically that's from 10.4% of the global economy to 5.5%. That is staggering. And sadly, it also resulted in the loss of 62 million jobs worldwide. But fortunately, the three of you panelists were not among them. And fortunately, all indications are that travel is starting to rebound, primarily in the leisure sector right now. We'll see what happens with business travel. But there's no question that there's a lot about traveling that will be different now as a result of the pandemic. So we're going to unpack, some of those trends. So we're going to start with Jen, my risk management guru. Jen, we've seen people's concerns about cleanliness and air quality and other, personal space aspects of the travel experience become, really heightened during the pandemic. So, and I think by and large, the industry responded with enhanced protocols, pretty quickly and marketed that out. What are some of the positive changes that you think will have staying power for the traveling public going forward?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity. I would say some of the things that you just highlighted, I think are going to be in the focus going forward. You had mentioned about cleanliness. I think that some of these items people have been thinking about for a long time, at least people like myself, that I typically traveled about 6 months a year. And my issue was always, I don't want to catch something whilst on my trip. Like for instance, on the airplane, who has not had that classic experience of someone sitting next to you, they're sprouting a fever actively, they're leaning on you, and then you're taking ill. So even though right now that's come to the forefront of leisure travelers and others, used to be sort of anecdotally interesting, I think everyone now has a deep interest because of COVID, including the airlines themselves. They're now most interested in ensuring the air filtration. They're also interested, there's a lot of studies about where the safest places to sit on a plane, which happens to be, from the perspective of germs, it happens to be by the window. And there, the patterns of sickness, if you're sitting at least 6 feet apart from that person, you have a better chance of not getting ill and other things. So I think this is staying power. I think there used to be a lot of embarrassment about wearing a mask if you were sick. I know I was skeptical when I would see that. I think now that's been normalized. I know that even the airlines are looking at how to redesign planes. There's been some really odd ways of looking at things like, and I posted about this on LinkedIn, where people aren't all on the same level, but it's almost like the old library where you're, at 2 different levels sitting, so your airspace is a little bit different. So I think that's here to stay. And the other thing that is here to stay is being prepared before you travel, because I think before this, people really didn't have that recognition of what could happen, or even think, how will I be rescued? What medical facility am I going to go to? What people are now doing is they're doing their research. That's very positive. They're doing their research before they're going to be traveling, and they may even purchase travel insurance and be very educated. I see that will remain for hopefully decades.
That's awesome. Thank you, Jen. So next we're going to talk to Janine, whose amazing fantasy job is to report the latest trends emerging in travel. So Janine, as we come out of the stress of COVID times, can you talk a little bit about this notion of travel as a prescription for wellness?
Okay, so first of all, Jen just stressed me out about my love of the aisle seat. So we can write off the wellness on that part. But anyway, so when we talk about wellness, that's both big picture, right? Meaning, how does travel in general make us feel good, spark joy, right? Travel is self-care. And then also specifically, it's looking at wellness-focused travel, which is a massive trend right now. So to address the first part quickly, let me just say that from the perspective of travel and leisure, Southeast Asia, the future pillars of travel, especially luxury, what's going to spark joy and open up our wallets, are things that are intimate, meaningful, and mindful. I'm going to talk about mindful later this hour, I think, so we can set that aside. But by intimate, I mean castaway and secluded. I mean solo travel, which was actually a growing market, especially for women before COVID, but also private groups and villas, whole resort or island buyouts. Today, I actually just talked to this owner of a company called like Eurasia Trains, and you can hire them to attach a couple of luxury sleeper cars and a private dining car to the end of like a state-owned train in Europe. And then you can create your own like personal Orient Express with your friends. And like all of that stuff together, right? And the zeitgeist term is togethering, and it means cocooning on vacation, like who good travel makes you feel good. So that's one thing, but like delving deeper, meaningful, right? That takes in a lot of things. That's about getting the most from your experiences, like chasing your passions or finding new ones, whether it's like food pilgrimages, which Netflix is responsible for, right? Or nature immersions, which COVID is responsible for partly. And wellness travel is a huge segment of this. It's becoming a pillar as integral to high-end travel as like thread counts and private pools. And the range of wellness is outstanding. And it's just like growing. Every day I'm surprised about like a new wellness resort that's opening, and in Asia especially. So here, right, resorts usually have a traditional healer on site, high end. So whether it's like traditional Chinese medicine, Ayurveda, a Balinese shaman, but now they're like contracting with multiple experts. They're getting medical doctors on site to give patients, or I guess I should say guests, a more holistic look at their health. Also full relaxation at the same time, learning to take home in like a 5-star cocoon. But like best of all, these are not detox retreats, like not if you don't want them to be. They still have those, but in this situation is more like, yeah, you can have wine, but maybe it's biodynamic wine. And maybe it's served alongside water that the resort played classical music to while they were filtering it, their in-house distillery, which, by the way, is something the Six Senses does at all of their properties. In terms of like medical tourism, we have outstanding hospitals here in Thailand, for example. People fly in for like operations, cheaper dental, stuff that's cheaper they can get in the States than the Middle East. And same in South Korea, actually, for plastic surgery. But that's like the old model. The new model is hospitals working in concert with a hotel. So there's like this new place called Raksha here in Bangkok, or there's also hotels that have their own in-house medical teams, like this place called Sangha in China. And you check in, you meet a doctor, you get your vitals taken, you get your blood drawn. It's like spa, healthy food, cool activities, sleep assistance, medical advice, all in one place. And like, so as for activities, right, it's flying yoga, stand-up paddleboard yoga, aquatherapy circuits, hammams, forest bathing, sound baths. And that's just like, that's the more innovative end of traditional wellness. And regular nice hotels are incorporating them in more and more. But there's also this like crazy cutting edge stuff. Like in Costa Rica, there's a resort that will administer you the psychotropic drug ayahuasca, and then act as your shaman and guide you through your trip. In Singapore, there's this place called Kai Suites that is a pre and postpartum hotel with luxury rooms, 24-hour nurses for your baby, Michelin dinners, and like a maternity-centric spa that gives breast lactation massages. And while I'm on the subject, ladies, there's futuristic treatments like vaginal rejuvenation on the menus of an increasing number of spas, which perhaps might have some of you guys seriously considering a trip to Asia post-COVID. And I'll end my spiel there.
Oh my, okay. Well, I was going to say that my ambition was going to use togethering in a sentence like in the next day, but then my mind was blown. So thank you, Janine. It was awesome. And then finally, Mark. So Mark started his career in the entertainment business, which is for another webinar, but then pivoted into the luxury travel concierge field out of that. So Mark, the whole idea is sort of, Janine was kind of hinting about this idea of a trip sort of being a curated experience from start to finish, lots of Instagrammable moments. Obviously, I'll venture to say the majority of travelers don't have access to that level of service, but I'd like you to talk a little bit about the trends you're seeing in leisure travel more broadly that speak to our emerging desire coming out of COVID to create truly unique experiences.
Yeah, I think what we've seen at least is, I mean, we've been in kind of in a unique position because I would say for the last 16 to 17 months, we've seen people travel and travel all over. But what we're seeing now, and what I think what we are always kind of seeing is the travelers becoming a little bit younger. They're staying for places a little bit longer, and the booking windows are becoming shorter. So what that means is there are people who used to literally book trips 2 to 3 years in advance, sometimes a year in advance, sometimes 6 to 9 months. The booking window is sub 30 days right now, which for the industry as a whole is like, they can't handle it because they're not used to that, especially like the high end resorts, but even small places. And you're seeing like tremendous compression in markets like Miami, where the rates are fluctuating wildly because they're just getting all this last minute demand. Because what I think is happening is people are getting more comfortable, they're getting vaccinated. But then also one of the bigger things we've seen too is after you travel the first time, you're more likely to travel a second time, a third time, a fourth time, and a fifth time. And I think people are also, they've been cooped up. So it's like, you're going to kind of go maybe a little bit harder than you normally would. So these destinations like Miami and Vegas are really booming right now. But then also you have the Caribbean that's been really consistent, and Mexico has been on fire. But I think what you're seeing is, again, these people are staying longer because they don't have to go back to an office on Monday. They don't have to leave, they don't have to wait until the workday ends at 5 o'clock because they can get on Wi-Fi on the plane. And then also the same thing with homeschooling. It allows people with families to be like, hey, we're going to spend 1 or 2 weeks in Punta Mita, and they have a great children's program, and my kid could get on Zoom for the 7 hours a day because they're going to be on Zoom anyway. They might as well be on Zoom by the ocean. So I think there are a lot of like interesting trends. Whether or not how much of that holds, I don't know, because obviously there are a lot of people who do like to plan a year in advance and stuff like that. And a lot of hotels, cruise companies, tour operators want that because it's hard for them to then actually plan if they can't, know what things are going to look like in a year or two with bookings. But I think that's what we're seeing. And I think being a younger agency and having a younger type of clientele, we've always had a short booking window. So for us, I'm used to people texting me. Even during this call, I have 7 text messages and I have 9 WhatsApps that are coming on my screen. I'm up to 12 emails now since we started. So it's like, we're used to kind of that fast pace. And that was something I also saw when I was in entertainment. And I think that's just the way the world's moving in general. Like, I don't think things are going to slow down.
Okay, tell them to join this webinar, definitely. So when the 4 of us got together for our pre-webinar Zoom chat, we were kind of talking a little bit how a lot of people might ease into traveling again by, maybe starting with a driving vacation first. So I think there's been a surge in RV rentals. There's actually going to be an RV going out of Alumni Relations this summer for an East on the Move tour. So keep an eye out for that.
Is that on the move?
It is on the move. Exactly. Yeah. So maybe once you've gotten out of the highways, you might book your first domestic flight. Although, based on the TV news footage that we're seeing of airports, I think a lot of folks are clearly, skipping step 1 and booking their flight right now. And then, once vaccination rates rise and international restrictions ease, global travel. So on that, I'm going to go back to Jen, since, you work with customers all over the world. What should every global traveler be doing in preparation for that journey? You started to hint at it a little bit in your first response. I mean, we've been so focused on the pandemic. What are, the other very real risks that people should consider before they pull out their passports?
Sure. And I'll also just comment, because I don't know if anybody else, we have participants on the line, have done any business travel yet, because that's another element to consider beyond the luxury travel market. But I myself have gone and traveled. I flew to Florida, and I've never seen the airports busier. There's pent up demand. They're definitely going. It's not just, to your point, basically just going by car or RV. But what are the other dangers? So if we can go back to a pre-COVID world, what people were always asking me about was what was reflected in the news. And again, I don't want to bum the people out on the teleconference here based on the fact that I'm raising risks, but Janine, I assure you, I'm the first to get on the plane and go travel. I still love it. I know all the risks. I have to educate people, but I still encourage people to travel. What are the things that people just standardly should be thinking about? If you have any like chronic medical conditions, make sure you bring your prescriptions. If you are going somewhere abroad that you don't know a ton about, obviously there's going to be a lot of fun to it, but I always encourage people to get educated. There's websites, including with the State Department, find out what the risks are, where to avoid, natural disasters, security risks, and more. Now, the funny part about that is my focus is typically people going from the US abroad, but the irony is people are concerned about coming here at this point in time. It's always, it used to be that I would educate people on overcoming concerns about going out into the world. People now have grave concerns about coming to the United States. They think that we have political unrest and more. But what are the things that you can do to assure yourself? Simple blocking and tackling. The US government, the State Department, I'm just going to say it, it's travel.state.gov. Please go to it. There's amazing free information that you can get oriented. You go abroad, please register for the STEP program. I had folks that got trapped in Peru when COVID first started, and we literally could not evacuate them. If we had, the government said nobody can come in, nobody can go out, potentially a $250,000 flight to get them out. The US government, after this person registered on the STEP program, they got them out. So the US government has those resources, UK government and more. There's a lot of free resources. The other thing that people, I just want to, and I'm going to turn it over to the rest of the team to speak. Always look at the policies that you have. You have free travel insurance, unlike like in your credit cards, your life insurance policies and more. You have so many resources that you probably don't know are buried in, and just get oriented and then get going. Janine, you really have me going. I can't wait to get over to you and get, rested and rejuvenated.
Yeah, I'll plan your trip.
Oh, I would love it. Amazing, amazing.
I know we're going to get to like hot destinations at the end of our conversation. Yes. So I'm sure that's why like 90% of the audience is here. They want to hear like actual recommendations. So no, but that's really good advice, Jen. So appreciate all that. So now, Janine, you sort of hinted at this too, that, I mean, we know travel, particularly international travel, offers a lot of benefits in terms of cross-cultural understanding, but let's be honest, it also has a profound and not always positive impact on the destination, certainly environmentally. Janine, like when we had our pre-webinar discussion, you were talking about regenerative travel as a growing movement. So would love to hear a little bit more about what that entails.
Right. So as I said earlier, travel is becoming more mindful. And so sustainable travel is about being aware of our eco footprints. But regenerative travel takes things a step further. It's about contributing positively to your surroundings and leaving things actually better off than when you got there. I'm not talking about voluntourism, although that is good, like do voluntourism if you can. But I'm talking about high-end experiences where real benefits go to the community. And the industry was headed this way already, but like the wokeness of this era globally has created like a seismic shift away from like colonial mindset tourism, which like you don't even realize you have until you get somewhere like, and all of the people showing you around are white people in a country of brown and tan people, So we've recently won stories on tours operated by indigenous people in places from Indonesia to Australia that help you fall in love with these places through the eyes of the locals whose ancestors been there for thousands of years and passed down the myths and the sciences of their lands. And we also, Black-owned safaris in Africa, and those that give locals, right, a proper share and voice in telling the stories. So like a really great example of this is this small ship cruise company. It's really actually a luxury yacht. It only has 9 berths. And it's called Contiki Expeditions. They're actually launching for the first time on the coast of Ecuador this summer. Every single village where the yacht stops receives specifically tailored socioeconomic help from the company. So Panama hats, for example, are actually from Ecuador. I don't know if anyone knew that. I didn't until I talked to these people, but they are. And the village that makes them has been like hemorrhaging young people for years, as with so many rural towns around the world, because they're going to cities for jobs or other countries. So Contiki is actually helping to train the young people in this village in digital marketing and social media and finance to help like keep the next generation in their hometown and keep like this historic millinery tradition alive. The company hired a sociologist to help them work with communities, each of the villages they visit, to make sure like your guest experience is as engaging as possible, and also like the social responsibility that the company engages in is like the most fruitful they can make it. And that's like real community empowerment. Like that's what regenerative travel means. And it's a good way for us to feel good about spending however much money you're going to spend on vacation.
Okay, so regenerative travel, we're going to be hearing more about it. Very cool. Mark, you're our token millennial on the panel. You had some interesting things to say in your earlier response about, just how your generations reshape the whole work-life paradigm, something we're certainly all appreciating after COVID. And how that impulse is resulting into more flexible approaches in tourism that combine work and play. Can you expand a little bit on that? And then maybe also, since you do have a big block of corporate business, just other things that you're seeing with business travel, how you think that's going to be impacted?
Well, I mean, it's funny, like the questions almost go hand in hand, because it used to be like you would go for work to maybe like to San Francisco for meetings, and then you'd be like, oh, I'm going to go up to Napa. Right? You would do other stuff. And like right now with corporate policies kind of being like, we're not traveling people, they're kind of having to figure it out on their own and try to plan trips on their own and not do it off of a work trip. But what we are seeing is like, at least on the corporate side, there's definitely some easing and looking forward towards, I would say like late Q3 and then Q4. And I think you're probably going to see a lot of groups in warm destinations come back. Like I do think there's some areas where it's going to be a little bit harder for conventions and conferences to return, which is a huge part of demand. But I think kind of what like I think the younger generation has always kind of done is there are more of these destinations where we were more apt to get on a flight and go to LA for a weekend, and now all of a sudden we could be in LA for 2 to 3 weeks, or we could be in LA for 3 months, depending on what your work life situation is. And obviously you're seeing clients migrate to all these other places, but I think also a lot is being kind of dictated by what restrictions are and where there are restrictions. And I think we've definitely seen more people go to Austin for things just because Texas has been more open than maybe New York, and same thing with Miami, and now that Vegas is opening more, and then the same thing with Mexico has been open, so that's kind of been a destination where a lot of people have gone for extended periods of time where they might have not gone before. So it's definitely like some interesting shifts, but also I think people are beginning to just think more about like I always used to joke, like I know people who work at the hotels in Hawaii, and I would always be like, well, you're smarter than all of us. Like you work every day in Hawaii. And now I think people are sitting there being like, wait, can't I live every day in Hawaii? I just might have to wake up very early to check my emails. So I think there is more of that. And I notice when I do Zooms with tons of people, like you start kind of like looking in their background, you're like, well, that doesn't look like an apartment in New York City or Chicago or San Francisco. That kind of looks like a palm tree in the background. That kind of looks like the ocean. Like, where are you? And they're like, oh yeah, I have family down in Florida. I came down for a month and a half. So sometimes it's a virtual one, but it's more real ones now, I'm finding. So
Jen's background looks very real.
It's so real. That's how you can see my hand disappear too.
Yeah.
So
I was gonna say your hair is blowing in the breeze. Yeah. Now, Mark, that's really helpful. So we're about the halfway point. So I just want to do a quick little reminder to people to put questions into the queue. We are starting to see a few, but we'd love to hear a few more from you. So I'm going to go down to what I think many of you sort of were hoping for, which was recommendations from this group of experts. So I'm going to put each of you kind of on the spot. So Jen, again, my risk management guru, considering all your knowledge of global risks, where would you still personally travel to?
Certainly anywhere in America, but jumping off of something that Janine said, which is, I really believe is privacy is the ultimate luxury now. So for instance, we have a plan to go to upstate of Michigan, the Upper Peninsula, and be in a large log cabin basically by ourselves. So I personally have also gone down to Florida, to Mark's point about certain places being open. I would love to be able to get to the UK. I would love to get to Canada. The real issue for everybody is to just keep monitoring where they're willing to have Americans. I know that personally, my willingness to travel was as soon as I was vaccinated, plus the requisite number of weeks. So I would love to again go where they'll have us. I think there's a lot of people just like me with a lot of pent up demand, but I think first people are trying to get together with family in safe zones, like I'm explaining about this log cabin on a lake off the grid.
Okay, that sounds really good. Janine, so you're our window to the other side of the globe. And once borders start opening, can you tell us like what countries in Asia are you like going to be first to visit or revisit?
Okay, well, so my number one is definitely off the grid. It's Bhutan. The definition basically of intimate, meaningful, and mindful all rolled into one. That's why I like the hotel brands that have multiple property journeys across the country there are the ones that like best fit with Bhutan's gross national happiness index. That's like the Amans of the world, the Komos, most recently Six Senses. Like I want to get Zen walking in the Himalayas. I want to like meet the Bhutanese people who everyone says are the loveliest in the world. They've also basically vaccinated the entire country in a week a couple months ago. So, fingers crossed that might happen. I also want to go on a yacht, a luxury sailing cruise by this company called Rascal Voyages, which is in Indonesia, and they have no fixed daily itinerary. So it kind of stops wherever the diving is clear, or the fishing is good that day, or the owner knows the villagers. They have multiple routes, but including it goes along the Spice Islands, which maybe right, is the home of nutmeg and the place that the Dutch traded for Manhattan. Super dream trip. Like I really want to go there. I've been wanting to for years. And the third place actually won't be open, I think, when Southeast Asia's borders open, but maybe at this rate that we're going, when China's finally are. And that's this place in Guangdong called Wild World China. Sorry, World Wild China. And it's been designed by one of the biggest architects in Asia. His name is Bill Bensley. He's an American. He got his architecture degree at Harvard, and he's known for like an over-the-top, more is more commitment to like his vision, super distinct designs. Like once you know a Bensley property, you see it. But he's also an intense preservationist. He cuts down no trees when he builds hotels, and he's pioneer in sustainable luxury travel. So this place, World Wild China, is a wildlife reserve for endangered animals, and those that they're rescuing from like sketchy zoos in China. And basically around the perimeter, they're going to build a bunch of hotels themed on like different places in Africa, Asia, and Australia. And then there's going to have like 4 sleeper trains running around it as well. And then in the middle, 90% of this massive land, they're going to dedicate to the animals, recreating the natural habitats as much as possible, letting them roam free, while the guests can like watch and learn from their hotel rooms. Bensley's calling it like a human zoo. And personally, like if that's who you call being in a fantastical, over-the-top Waldorf Astoria surrounded by bucket list animals, I'm super down.
Those all sound amazing.
Yeah.
So, and finally, Mark, what cracked me up when we all had our meeting was Mark, who sends people all over the place, is like he himself does not really like to travel. He's such a dyed-in-the-wool New Yorker. So So I don't know that it's going to be so much a framing of, Mark, where are you dying to go, especially since you have one little baby and another on the way. But where are you advising your clients to go to now?
Well, I'm advising them right now to go to places that are open and that we feel like you could get back from. So that
Yes.
basically includes all basically 49 out of the 50 states. You could go to Alaska, but it's a little bit far and there's a lot that's not really available to us in between. But the one caveat I tell everyone is like, look, here's the thing. Mexico has been open this entire time. There's no COVID test to go down to Mexico. You only need a COVID test on the way back up. And it's super easy to get it. It's affordable. Almost every resort does it in-house. So Mexico is super easy. Hawaii is been open since around a little bit before Thanksgiving. They have very specific COVID tests you need to get to take over there. So, but Hawaii has been open and has been consistently open for about 8 months now. You have places in the Caribbean like Anguilla shut down for a couple of weeks. St. Bart's closed down for a couple of weeks, but like Turks has remained open. Bahamas has done a really good job of reopening. So like if I'm telling people Mexico, Caribbean, Hawaii are all good and those are easy and you don't really need to go crazy. The other thing I'll tell everyone is make sure your passports are up to date and make sure you're really ahead of that, because right now you can't even rush a passport. A rush passport used to be 24 to 72 hours. Right now it's about 4 to 6 weeks. And that's the most common issue we're running into with people is their passport isn't up to date because for a year and a half they weren't using it. But what we're also seeing is we're seeing people return to Europe. We're seeing places like Italy and Greece, but where they're going in Italy, you're talking about Lake Como and Tuscany. People don't really want to be in Rome, Milan, or Florence because it's crowded. The vaccination rates aren't that high. And I saw someone, mention something about like family travel. Like that's a little bit different because obviously, depending on where you're going, like they might require a COVID test for your kids and they might not. And there's some places where I think like the Bahamas is, I think 11 and below, no COVID test. So like that makes it easier for people. But then also if you go to places like Italy where the vaccination rate isn't that high, to have your kids over there and not be vaccinated, again, that's a risk that to each their own. But like I said, what we're seeing is a lot of, let's call it within 6 hours of the United States of going, but we're also seeing this reemergence of people hitting up Utah, hitting up Jackson Hole, hitting up Arizona, hitting up all parts of the West Coast, and exploring places that they weren't going to before. And I think that's really like, it might be a boring answer because I'm not saying, oh, like go on this great thing to Iceland or here or there, because it's just like there's a little bit unknown about that stuff. And like the one thing I always tell people is like I don't foresee them closing Utah, but I do foresee them closing, potentially closing an island in the Caribbean if the cases get too high, or closing parts of Europe to us. And what you don't want is a situation where you get trapped in places. Look, Costa Rica, by the way, is another place that has kind of been open for a while and has done a really good job. And there's some amazing resorts there. So that's another place. But like, I don't see Brazil happening for quite some time. So I just think, like I said, you have to kind of pick and choose your spots, but then you also have to pick and choose your comfort level and how many tests do you want to take to do that. And I remember the first time I took a COVID test out of a precaution type thing, and I was like, it ain't worth getting on a plane to do that. But I mean, that was just my opinion, but I know it's gotten easier. But I said people will travel for all different types of things, but we are seeing Europe reemerge. But again, it's those places in Europe that are more, let's call it beach destinations or better for social distancing, not crowded cities.
Okay, so good advice too on the passport. And that reminded me with respect to domestic travel, and I invite any of you to answer this, because so with the Real ID, just getting onto a plane without having to bring a passport for domestic travel, and they keep pushing that date back. Does anyone know when that is actually taking effect?
I think they just keep pushing it back and back and back
Right.
and back and back. It's just like everything that's kind of government oriented and goes back to the passport thing is just not getting done quickly. And again, that's why it's like, check your passports, because it used to be you could pay a fee and get it done in $300 you get your passport in 2 days. And now it's like 4 to 6 weeks and people are missing out on vacations and stuff. It's crazy.
And I just wanted to chime in, Mark, with more detail, because everything you were saying was firing all cylinders of what to think about, especially about getting trapped. I did want to say that as it relates to the passport, the things you need to look at is it needs to be active at least 6 months after your return home journey is planned, and you must have 2 blank pages before you go. So again, that's on that State Department website. Do that research. I have a friend who's a hardened traveler, and he fell into that trap, Mark, of not knowing this about the passport. So simple blocking and tackling, take a look and research.
Also, your passport should be valid for 6 months prior to travel. Big thing too.
Yeah, no, this is all really, really good advice. So, I mean, in fact, all of this has been awesome. And we're about to go into the Q&A section because we've starting to see a lot of questions, which is exciting. But before we do that, I want to sort of ask one more question of all of you. And this is really about just you and your business, since you each bring such different perspectives from your various vantage points in the industry. So here's my final question to the three of you. Is there anything different about the way you're going to be doing your job going forward as a result of the way you had to change things during COVID? In any order, go for it.
I mean, I guess I'll jump into it. I used to go on business trips. I'd fly to Seattle for a lunch and then jump back on the plane and then fly back. I know that other business executives are taking a look at that and saying that's just ridiculous, which I will be doing more things virtually. And I will say in the business world, the soonest that people are doing conferences, the first conference that I have scheduled is in mid-October. And these things still keep getting canceled and pushed off. And the conferences are actually now virtual. It's not the same, but that's something that's a difference until we clear this pandemic environment. And that I think that will remain. I will never sacrifice my time traveling just for like a lunch and then fly back. Not doing it.
I mean, my magazine is now virtual, thanks to the fact that we are regionally distributed, right? And couldn't get them across borders thanks to COVID. So that's like a major way I've changed doing business, just reinventing, right, for digital, but also in terms of our perspective and what we are going to care about, what we're going to push to our readers. I run a luxury travel magazine, but and I love a private helicopter as much as anyone, but we need to pay attention more to the earth and our impact. And now every property that I hope, right, worth its salt is ban plastic straws, single-use plastics, beach resorts have turtle sanctuaries and coral nurseries, and that is great. That's the baseline. You don't get credit for that anymore, right? I care about back of house now. I want to promote hotels like permaculture gardens and waste management systems. Food waste is a ridiculously huge problem in hospitality. And there's actually a lot of innovations in this market. There's things that compact your trash into water and things that turn garbage into bricks. I also care about the industry itself. In the Maldives, where actually you can go, America, resort workers in the Maldives get hazard pay because of how mentally taxing it is to live on an island with the same people. And most of them live in the middle of these islands, in dorms, right? So it's actually quite stressful. And there's this new development in the Maldives by a group of hotels, Capella, Ritz-Carlton, and their new brand, Patina. Each hotel has their own island, but there's a fourth that it's like a town just for the staff so that they can enjoy the paradise they live in. It's super revolutionary, Henry Ford style way to think about work and life, but in a more exotic place than Michigan. No offense to you Michiganders out there. But I guess my point is that we in the travel industry have, thanks to COVID, more self-righteous ammunition to tut-tut about over-tourism. But I think we can all agree travel is going to come back with a vengeance. And so the people who are going to be proactively caring about their staff and their communities and the earth, that's who we're going to be paying attention to, from our journalistic perspective. That's who I'm going to be encouraging people to visit.
Oh, no, me. I was gonna say, I mean, for me, it's just more of, I think the more stops and starts, because I think what we're seeing now is just At least for us, it used to be like, you know, if we book someone to go somewhere in 6 to 7 months or even in a year, like I was under the assumption, barring, you know, some health issue, that they were always going. And now it's just kind of like you don't really take anything for granted. And I think it's one of those things where, like, when the pandemic started, you know, we were really proactive in just getting everything canceled and fully refunded for our clients, because I was like, look, like, I don't want to, like, you know, I don't want you guys to have a credit that's good for a year, because I was like, I don't know what the world's going to look like in a year, and I don't want to make bets that everything's going to be back to normal. And it was a pretty good thing we didn't do that, because the world wasn't back to normal a year later. But the one thing I said at the beginning of, you know, at the end of February of, you know, last year, and I keep saying it now, I go, whatever I tell you in the morning is probably not going to be true by the time you go to bed. So it's like you kind of got to keep on top of what the news cycle is going, because it's changing. There are new variants. I literally, as we're doing this, I just got an email that Israel now is pushing tourism back a month to combat the Delta variant. So like there's always going to be these starts and stops, I think, moving forward. And again, that's why it's kind of, you know, people say to me, well, I definitely want to go away this week in July or August or September. Where can I go? And I can 100% feel confident I'm going away. It's probably not to, you know, Europe and far-flung destinations, probably for another year or so, just because of the way the world is working. And again, it might not be sexy, because you might not want to go back to Mexico, you might not want to go to Utah, you might not want to go to those places, but that might, or you might not want to go to Florida, but those might be your best options based on just the fact that we have a lot of vaccine to give out until we get to the point where this isn't an issue and countries aren't shutting borders to us and to others. So like I said, we're not out of the woods yet. And I think it's just, you know, I tell people, don't count your eggs before they hatch or whatnot. So chickens, your chickens before they hatch, right? Your eggs, chickens. I don't know. I didn't take any farming classes in college. You know.
Which came first? All right, are you guys ready for some audience questions? Because we're starting to get a lot, so this is great. All right, let's see. I'm going to start with Tamanika Stewart saying, what trends are you seeing for family travel in regard to domestic and international travel in all price points of the market? How are venues managing young children who are not able to get vaccines? Good point. Offers of entertainment for all ages? Who wants to take that?
I'm happy to do it. A lot of the hotels, they suspended their kids club programming to a degree, just because if it's indoors, they can't do it. But like a lot of the nice hotels have really good programming, but a lot of hotels, the water parks are open or the pools are open. They do have like outdoor programming. And I think, I want to say Four Seasons has done a really good job. Rosewood's done a really good job, and Ritz-Carlton have done a really good job of building out, and actually Mandarin too, building out really good and comprehensive kids programs for when families do come, so the kids feel occupied. And then obviously, like if you go to a place where there's a beach or a pool, you're probably going to get more stuff to do. But at the same point, if you go places, ski destinations and stuff, you know, you can go skiing, you can do all of that stuff. You know, I think where you're seeing probably some of the limitations are some of the all-inclusives and stuff like that, where it's just a little bit of a different experience for the kids. But more and more stuff is opening up. And again, it's just, I think it's more of a comfort level thing, to be honest. And how much, you know, you trust other people, because at these resorts, like there are kids running around, like it just is what it is right now.
And I'll just chime in from what I see from our leisure market. Airbnb, families are getting Airbnbs and renting the whole home, so that again, they're isolated, but in a cool, interesting location that is actually not their own home. VRBO is on fire. People also are renting RVs. Even getting rental vehicles now is very difficult. People are taking these driving vacations. So that's some things I'm seeing here in the United States.
I think Mark mentioned earlier also Zoom classes, like prepping spaces for Zoom classes for kids. There's several resorts, especially one I'm thinking of in Fiji, that both they do that, and then they have like in-house tutors, so that you just like decamp your family from one place to the other. And also you can do the work from home while your kids are working from home with like the hotel's staff.
Okay, So now we've got a question from Ann Bridges. I think there's probably a couple of you who might be able to answer this. What's your best guess as to when China will be open to visits by foreigners? I've heard rumors it won't be until well into 2022. What do you think?
I probably should be positioned to answer this considering my brother lives in Shanghai, but they're barely letting people out of China, to be frank. It's a giant gamble as to whether even Chinese people should leave China and whether the border will be open for them to return. So definitely not until next year. I don't know definitely because the government hasn't told me that, but I'm going to say definitely not until next year, considering how cautious they're being.
Anybody else? Nope, we're good. Okay, sounds good.
I agree.
So let's see, what else do we have? So many good questions. Tracy Davis, who is actually at Denver International Airport right now, so is probably seeing a lot of crowds, says, how much of your clients' travel choices are driven by COVID levels or restrictions? So testing versus no testing, for example, or are travelers more interested in the destination so are willing to deal with COVID?
I guess I can answer that. I mean, the restrictions definitely play a role. Because if the more hoops you have to jump through, the less you want to do it. And, depending on, again, there are certain tests that are free, there are certain forms that are free, but there is I think it's to go to Turks and Caicos, you have to buy some insurance. It's like $30 a person. But again, all of a sudden it's all these add-ons when you start getting the tests and you start doing all these other things where maybe there's an extra $500 to $1,000 on a trip. And you're just you know what, I could go to Miami and it's it's just the more hoops there are to jump through, I think the more it's causing issues. But I think what we're at least beginning to see is it's becoming easier and easier, and destinations are realizing hey, we got to have COVID tests on site so people can get back into the States quickly. And big resorts are setting that up, and even small ones. I'm pretty sure any of the top resorts now in Mexico, you could basically get a COVID test on site to come back to the States now. And they made it really, really easy.
And I'll just say that the issue with the different testing for you to come back, the assumption is that you will test negative and off you go, but the reality is not true. And here's what you really have to think about is, you've got two kids, it's mom, dad, we go to Mexico, one of us tests positive, who's staying behind? You can't get on a plane if you're positive. So you'll have to obviously endure having COVID. What is your level of COVID? What's the best hospital for you to go to? Do you need to be medically evacuated? That's very expensive. There's a specific way to evacuate people that are, active with COVID. It's not really safe to be in a plane. So I hate to be the Debbie Downer on this one, but if you test positive, you are trapped. And that is what I think the other element of, if you've got to get tested to come and leave, you might literally get trapped there. So be prepared to be there for a couple weeks or more till somebody no longer is testing positive.
We're about to go into a massive experiment with that in Thailand, with Phuket reopening provisionally to vaccinated tourists, but with multiple testing. And when you test positive, the rules are straight to the hospital you go. So that's, I don't,
Right, so
I
do you
want
want
people to
that
come to Thailand, but it's actually a great question from the person who asked it, because really I don't really know. That's a question we're going to be looking at over the next month or so here.
So we're getting a lot of questions about travel insurance, not surprisingly. And here's one from Kathy Clark. And she says, would you foresee any impacts to travel insurance related to the pandemic? For instance, will vaccination status impact insurability? Could there be clauses that won't cover you if you travel to a country with low vaccination rates, or clauses that won't cover you if you become sick with COVID while on vacation?
Mm-hmm. Well, the travel insurance industry has been looking into this deeply. What it looks like that the travel industry is doing for the leisure travel is actually creating cancel for any reason clauses, which is more favorable for the traveler. That level of granularity that our questioner provided would be wonderful if we could get to that, because I think that would free up the people that have gotten vaccinated. The insurers will say there's less risk, and thus we can be more open to the travel. It's not at that level of granularity yet, but I love your question. Hope that helped.
No, that was great. Let's see, my colleague Layla Durstein is saying, Janine, I appreciate you speaking to sustainable travel that positively impacts Indigenous and local communities. Can the panelists address the pre-COVID trend of over-tourism in specific locales and whether travel consumers can expect that trend to continue with renewed demand for travel, or has the pandemic afforded countries permission to be more restrictive with the number of visitors?
Well, I think it has afforded them permission. I'm not sure that everyone has taken advantage of the time. I mean, the funny thing here in Southeast Asia, everyone's kind of like, okay, as soon as I can get out into another country, a lot of people are like, oh, I'm going to go to the next country over, right? I'm going to go to Siem Reap and see the temples before everyone from the West comes back. Or I'm going to go to, so I'm not quite sure. I think in Europe, actually, there's been, and maybe Mark can speak to this better, but I think in Europe, there's been more of a concerted effort to, for destinations to sort of like Venice, right? Like Athens, to pay better attention to how many people are coming in, to limiting. I mean, one thing that's going to happen is the limit of cruise ships coming in to ports automatically is going to change over tourism. But a year ago, I would have said, yes, definitely, right? But I think a lot of people were treading water, and with the amount of money that's been lost, it's really hard to say. I think a lot of sustainable travel comes from private sector up as opposed to government down, with exceptions of certain countries like New Zealand, Slovenia is a good example. But I don't know, that's my answer. Mildly hopeful.
Yeah, mildly hopeful. That's our watchword. Okay, let's see. I think we have time for maybe one or two left, because I do want to be respectful of people's time. So let me see here. Oops, that one's done. So someone says, we bailed on Colorado, my home state. Oh, this is Kent. Sorry, Kent Rude. We bailed on Colorado, my home state, and Oregon because of rental car questions. Any update on that situation? And
Yes.
Also notes, we are looking at previously unimaginable places like Lake Erie in Ohio, or in Cleveland or Pittsburgh.
Yeah, I'll just jump in on the rental car issue. The issue is you can't get them. It's rented. They're not available. The price is higher, so you have to plan ahead on the rental car issue.
Okay, that's that. So sadly, I think we're reaching the end of our time for questions. Questioners, we will save your questions, and actually, I think any of our panelists would be open to my sharing them with them later, and maybe them answering you privately. So anyway, I want to first of all say thank you again to our three amazing panelists. They've shown us that a liberal arts education can take you anywhere professionally or literally in their case. So we're putting their contact info and socials in the chat. So I really encourage everybody here to follow these industry influencers. I want to thank all of you in the audience who took time to attend. I feel like this webinar could have gone for an hour and a half easy, but we may just have to do a part two. You're all going to be receiving a super quick survey about your experience at this webinar, and we really welcome your feedback. And we also welcome your ideas for future topics. And I'm just going to put it out there, maybe you're even interested in being a presenter yourself. I think these three would tell you that we in alumni relations make it a lot of fun for you. So we are going to share a link for the Williams at Work webinar submission form in the chat. So do think about it. Any work-related topic is fair game. And finally, I want to ask you all to put July 13th on your calendar. That's when we're going to be hosting another travel-focused talk. This one is featuring author Amanda Eyre Ward, class of '94, whose best-selling novel, The Jet Setters, here it is our
cool.
current Purple Prose online book club selection.
Awesome.
Yeah, she'll be in conversation with writer and life coach Sahia El Khoury, class of '93, and we're putting the link to the registration form in the chat as well. So really encourage you guys to join that. And finally, from all of us working for you here in the virtual Purple Valley, including my amazing colleague, Caitlin, she's been totally running the show behind the scenes. I want to wish you all to have a great rest of the day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. And it was fun, Wendy, you're right.
Yeah.
Done. Oh.
Done.
Oh.